What is up, boys and girls? Welcome back to Iconic Engines. Today we're covering our first ever V8 engine within Iconic Engines, and we are starting off with some all-aluminum quad-cam Toyota muscle. Of course, I'm talking about the 1UZFE, and I'm going to be pronouncing that as UZ for the rest of the video because it makes it easier than to spell the whole thing every time, and I will be repeating the engine name many times throughout this video. Also, I want to let you know that this is our 5th video that has been made possible by AEM. As you already know, AEM are the top dogs when it comes to aftermarket performance electronics. Doesn't matter if you're a car enthusiast, a professional tuner, or a full-on motorsport racing team, AEM has the electronics to take your build to the stratosphere. So if you need some top-notch stuff that has been engineered to outperform, definitely check out this video's description because there you can find the links to amazing AEM digital dash displays, ECUs, fuel pumps, and more. Also, last time, thanks to AEM, I was able to invest in some audio equipment and improve the audio in the Iconic Engines video series. This time, again thanks to AEM, I was able to invest in some lighting equipment. Boom! Let there be a light! So the 1UZ engine, UZ, that's just stupid, whose idea was that? The 1UZ engine made its debut in 1989 in the engine bay of the Lexus LS400, the car that basically made the Lexus brand. But to compact the debut of this engine into this one single sentence that sort of makes it sound like it just popped out of nowhere in 1989 would be a massive insult to a relentless pursuit of quality that started 6 years before with Project F1. Now, F1 has nothing to do with Formula 1. It was a secret Toyota project, and F1 stood for Flagship Sedan No.1. And this was a project initiated in 1983 by none other than Toyota chairman himself, Mr. Eiji Toyoda. The goal of Project F1 was to make a luxury sedan that would rival and outdo flagship vehicles offered by American and European brands. And to make this happen, Toyota went all in. The F1 project had no budget and it had no time constraint. Basically, Toyota was willing to spend everything it took to make this happen. And to make it happen, Toyota had 600 designers, 1,400 engineers, 2,300 technicians, and 200 supporting staff working on the F1 project. Basically, that's a medium-sized village of Toyota employees making this happen. But the number of people isn't what's impressive. What's impressive is what these people did. Now, Chief Engineer Ichiro Suzuki, who surprisingly wasn't a very obvious spy for Suzuki, was leading a team of designers and engineers that over the course of Project F1 developed 450 vehicle prototypes and 900 engine prototypes. One of those engine prototypes that came on top was the 1UZ engine. Once engineers settled on an engine design, they decided to celebrate the new engine by putting it through hell. Development teams on the F1 project clocked more than 2.7 million kilometers driving the LS400 prototypes with 1UZ-FE engines in them everywhere from the Nordic regions of Europe to the scorching sun and sand of the deserts in Saudi Arabia. 2.7 million kilometers, that's actually enough to go from United States coast to coast more than 650 times. Designs of the LS400 and the 1UZ-FE were reviewed countless times. Something that many other manufacturers would find totally acceptable was reviewed again and again and improved until it was basically perfect. So there really is no surprise factor to the fact that the LS400 and the 1UZ FE engine is one of the most reliable Toyota products ever made. It's actually one of the most reliable automotive products ever made. In 2007, the LS400 made the Consumer Reports list of recommended vehicles that regularly do more than 200,000 miles. But now it's 2020 and many owners around the world have actually proven that the 1UZ FE engine can do twice that easily with nothing but regular maintenance. By the time the F1 project was finished and the receipts tallied up, Toyota had spent more than $1 billion to make the LS400 happen, but it was all worth it. When the LS400 hit the market, it was quieter, it was faster, it had a lower coefficient of drag, it had better fuel economy, and to top it all off, it was cheaper than all of its competitors. The secret was out and everybody was dumbstruck.
Now, this is not a test we normally perform on Top Gear, but it's a perfect illustration of the Lexus engine. I can put a glass of water on top of the unit, and at idle there isn't even a disturbance in the surface. Better still, I can have the engine revved to 6,000 RPM. And as you can see, the water doesn't even tremble. Now, that's not something you can do with the other three rivals. Toyota tell us they had a team of 60 engineers working on noise, vibration and harshness, and the results speak for themselves.
But the 1UZ was a very ambitious engine. After it had impressed land dwellers with its lightweight and compact design, amazing smoothness and power and reliability, the 1UZ wanted more. It wanted to fly. The 1UZ is actually one of the very few automotive engines that was given production certification and approval to be used in airplanes by the United States Federal Aviation Administration. In its airplane form, the 1UZ is called the FV2402TC, and it's a twin-turbo 360 horsepower engine. Pretty cool, right? So after flying, the 1UZ decided that it wanted to swim, and swim it did as well. It actually ended up in some Toyota boats. Talk about smooth sailing with a very smooth V8. After it did swimming and flying, the 1UZ decided that it wanted to save lives too. And save lives it did as well. It actually ended up in the engine bay of the Toyota Hi-Ace Hi-Matic ambulance van. Which is pretty cool. Even if you don't make it, at least you died in a all-aluminum V8 quad-cam 32 valve powered ambulance van. So after flying, swimming and being a paramedic, there was just one thing left on the 1UZ's bucket list, and it was racing. To race, the 1UZ ended up in the engine bay of the SARD MC8R. Where it developed 600 horsepower in twin turbocharged form. Sadly though, the 1UZ wasn't a great success in the Le Mans. The MC8R really couldn't keep up with the likes of the Porsche 911 GT1, and the most notable result it did in Le Mans was finishing second to last, which is kind of meh.
And that car ahead of him on his right is well on fire. It's one of the SARD Toyotas. It's Tatsuya Tanigawa trying to get back to the pits, but that car is well aflame.
But even though it wasn't a great hit in Le Mans, today car enthusiasts have discovered the amazing potential of the 1UZ engine. Being lightweight and being compact and being a V8 makes it an amazing swap into pretty much everything. And today, enthusiasts are swapping the 1UZ into cars that are much lighter and much more nimble than the LS400 where the 1UZ originated. And now you can see 1UZs kicking ass on everything from the drag strip to drift events to circuit racing. So let's start what we always start with when it comes to the engine specs: bore and stroke. When it comes to the 1UZ, we have 87.5 millimeters of bore and 82.5 millimeters of stroke, which gives us a pretty over square engine design. And having 8 cylinders, it also means that we have a pretty healthy engine displacement of 4 liters. As you already know, the 1UZ is an all aluminum design, which means we have an aluminum engine block and aluminum cylinder heads. When it comes to the block, we have a 90-degree angle between the cylinder banks. Inside the engine block, you're going to find a forged steel crankshaft with 8 counterweights. This is pretty neat, as usually on mass production V8 engines, you're going to find 6 counterweights. We have another pretty cool thing in the aluminum engine block, and that's 6-bolt cross-bolted main bearing caps. On top of the main bearing cap, you find these 4 bolts, but on the sides there are 2 additional bolts that bolt the side of the main bearing cap to the block. The crankshaft and the over square engine design actually make the 1UZ FE look like a racing engine. And this was something that was confirmed by a statement in 2007 from David Courier, who was president of TRD USA then. And he said that the 1UZ FE engine design was actually based on an Indy Racing League engine design, and that there were plans to use the 1UZ in the GT500 racing series. The connecting rods are made from sintered forged steel. The pistons use a hyper-eutectic aluminum alloy with additional steel struts that help control the thermal expansion. Also, the piston skirts have been finely grooved to help aid better lubrication and reduce frictional losses. Moving from the engine block to the cylinder head, the letter F in 1UZ FE becomes apparent. As you might already know, F stands for economy-oriented cylinder heads in Toyota engine codes, while G stands for performance-oriented cylinder heads, such as, for example, in the 4AGE or the 3SGE. While the cylinder heads of the 1UZ FE definitely aren't bad, they aren't as outright performance-oriented as you might think they would be when looking at that motorsporty engine block. So what do the cylinder heads have? They do have a pent-roof combustion chamber with good squish areas and a spark plug in the middle. They also do have 2 camshafts per cylinder head, giving us a quad cam engine design. However, only the intake camshaft is driven by the timing belt. The exhaust cam is driven by the intake cam via a gear between the 2 camshafts. The valve included angle, which is the angle between the valves themselves, is pretty narrow and economy oriented in the 1UZ engine, and it sits at 22 degrees and 33 minutes. When it comes to the valve sizes, we have some pretty average valve sizes of 33.5 millimeters on the intake valves and 28 millimeters on the exhaust valves. The camshaft profiles are also expectedly relatively conservative, and we have some pretty mild duration and lift on both the intake and the exhaust. In its original form, the 1UZ engine makes 256 horsepower and has a pretty nice 353 Newton meters of torque. It also has a compression ratio of 10:1. Now, the 1UZ received revisions in late 94 and in 97. Both of these times, a lot of little things were redesigned and improved upon, but the big ones to mention are in 94, the compression was increased to 10.4, and this resulted in an increased power output of 261 horsepower. But 97 was the big one, and this is when the UZ received variable valve timing, actually Toyota's VVT-i, and another small bump in compression to 10.5. All of this resulted in the final power output of 290 horsepower. prices of popular big swap engines like the 2JZ or the RB skyrocketing, the 1UZ is actually a breath of fresh air on the tuning scene. It's a V8 that's compact, so you can swap it into cars that are much smaller and lighter than the Lexus and Toyota cars that the 1UZ originally came with. But it also has a good bottom end and great power potential. I mean, what's not to like? It's also becoming an ever more popular swap into the Toyota GT86/BRZ/FRS, and even some Supras are foregoing the traditional 1JZ, 2JZ route and are instead stuffing a 1UZ into their engine bay. So swapping a 1UZ into something else is going to be our stage 0. Basically find a nice, clean, low mileage 1UZ and stuff it into the engine bay of whatever you want. Now, when doing this, most 1UZs do come from Japan or have an unknown history, so you have no idea what are the actual miles other than somebody telling you what are the miles. So definitely consider doing basic servicing, replace the timing belt, replace some gaskets, do an oil flush and all that, to ensure that your new old engine is fresh and ready to be enjoyed. When it comes to choosing a 1UZ to swap into something, if you aren't planning on extensively modifying your engine or adding forced induction, actually the later 1UZs, the ones after 1997 that have variable valve timing and an increase in compression, are the most enjoyable to drive in stock form on the street, and they do make the most power. The 1UZ also works great for drifting. I know Toyota never thought about drifting when they were designing the 1UZ, but leave it to car enthusiasts. Give us an engine and we'll do everything the manufacturer never intended to do with it. I mean, that's what makes us cool, right? So 1UZ and drifting. Now the 1UZ has a smooth, linear power delivery, and it also has a pretty healthy amount of torque. Combine that with a lightweight rear-wheel drive chassis, and maintaining long, smooth, beautiful drifts becomes a joy with a 1UZ engine. Let's say you want more power. You're not satisfied with the stock power output. How do you get more power? Well, the first thing in your way is actually the ECU. Don't do anything else until you get a tunable standalone ECU. As you might know, Toyota ECUs can't be chipped or hacked into, so there's no way of modifying the existing ECU, and you have to get a standalone. But once you get a standalone for a 1UZ, you're gonna open many doors for yourself, because all the other mods that you add onto it later are gonna make the most they can with a standalone ECU. After you've done the ECU, you can start by getting rid of those stock economy-oriented exhaust manifolds and replacing them with more performance-oriented ones. There are off-the-shelf aftermarket solutions for exhaust manifolds on a 1UZ, but depending on what you're swapping the 1UZ into, you might be forced to make some custom ones. On the intake side of things, if you have an older 1UZ FE engine, the aftermarket ECU is actually going to allow you to get rid of the stock restrictive airflow meter and do a cold air intake. All of these mods for stage 1 are going to yield around 15 to 25 extra horses for you. For stage 2, we are going to tackle the cylinder heads. Now, the cylinder heads of the 1UZ with their narrow encoded valve angle and their port design are actually probably one of the most limiting factors when it comes to performance on the 1UZ engine. But while you can't redesign the cylinder head and replace it with a totally different one, you can tackle the camshafts and the valve angles and other stuff. You can get some aggressive cams and replace the stock mild camshaft profiles. You can upgrade the valve springs, and you can also have some more performance oriented valve angles cut. After that, you can port and polish the cylinder heads, and then you're looking at additional maybe 20 to 30 horsepower depending on the camshaft profile you go for. Always, when it comes to camshaft profiles, don't forget massive power gains in the top range almost always come at the expense of losses in the bottom end of the RPM range. Our standalone ECU is also going to enable us to get rid of the factory intake and replace it with some individual throttle bodies. How about 2 sets of ITBs from the 4AG20 valve? This is going to give us an extra sharp throttle response, an amazing soundtrack, and an additional 10 to 15 horses. Now, naturally aspirated tuning beyond this point actually becomes ever more expensive with ever decreasing rewards, because you really can't overcome the design of the stock cylinder heads. But what you can do is forced induction. Turbo supercharger nitrous, the 1UZ, has a pretty good bottom end, and it has proven itself at being pretty good at coping with forced induction. When it comes to choosing a 1UZ engine to use for forced induction, we're going to do the opposite of what we did when we were talking about a stock swap. We actually want the early engines for forced induction, and those are all engines made in 1994 and before. These are better for boost because they're over-engineered a bit compared to later engines. They have thicker and beefier internals. However, these early Gen 1UZs are becoming ever harder to find, so many people settle for the later engines and upgrade the pistons and conrods. When it comes to safe boosted power levels for the stock block of the 1UZ, all generations can take safely up to around 450 horsepower. However, many people have pushed the stock first generation internals to well above 500 horsepower. So we can assume a safe power level for the first gen to be around 550 horsepower, let's say. But all of these safe power levels are just an estimate, and they should be taken with a grain of salt, like a huge, giant, this big grain of rock salt. And then you can keep this big grain of rock salt on the side so you can smash it over your head when a horrible tune kills your engine at power levels well below those deemed as safe. I always repeat this in my videos. Safe power levels assume a good tune. They assume knock monitoring and other safety measures that save your engine's life. A horrible tune based on guesswork is gonna ruin an engine way below safe power levels. When it comes to turbos, you have the option of going for a big single turbo or doing twin turbos. The V configuration is really asking for twin turbos, and there are a lot of really good 1UZ twin turbo builds out there. However, the aftermarket in general is still lagging behind when it comes to the 1UZ, and it isn't even comparable to more popular engine platforms. And while the aftermarket is catching up recently, you still will need to do custom stuff probably when it comes to more serious tuning of the 1UZ. When it comes to supercharging, supercharging is also relatively popular, and it works well with this engine. When it comes to superchargers, many people use the M90 from Eaton or the Terminator Cobra supercharger, although others have been used as well. Expected power levels are, with a basic supercharger conversion, you can expect around 350 horsepower. With supporting mods and a lower compression forged pistons, you can look at around 400 and 420, maybe 430 horsepower at around 10 to 11 psi. it comes to nitrous, the situation is pretty similar as with turbos. If you upgrade your pistons and rods, the sky really becomes the limit, and 600, 700, 800 horsepower 1UZ FE builds aren't really that uncommon anymore. And there you have it, the 1UZ FE engine. Hope you enjoyed that, hope you found it useful, informative, and yeah, now it's time to end the video with what we always end the video, and that is rap. And this time it's in Japanese. No, I don't speak Japanese. I did go to a basic course, and I did get a basic elementary level certificate, which enables me to order a drink at a restaurant and say hi and goodbye. They definitely didn't teach us how to rap, but I dug my own grave by saying challenge accepted to a Japanese rap idea in the comments section, and I just spent the last hour and a half on Google Translate trying to figure out how to do this, and it's probably going to be horrible and full of grammar mistakes, but I did it to myself, so let's do this. 僕は一渦フェです。あなた冗談ですメッセーです。強いブロックを持っています。どこでも絞ることができます。ターボ、スーパーチャージャー、またはニトロ。僕はよいろい隣人です。トトロ。あなた強いブロック強いブロックが強いブロックを持っています。強いブロックが持っています。ブロックを持っています。